Hello, my name is Joe Chrisman, and I'm running to take Suzanne Bonamici's seat. So why am I doing that? Well, I've never been as mad at my government as I am now. And for me, that's not a small thing. I've been a libertarian since I was a teenager. We're always whining about everything, and most of the stuff we're whining about is indeed bad. We whine about how the government overtaxes us, creates and enforces unjust laws, how it starts wars, and we do what we can to fight those things, and those are all bad things that we should fight. But unfortunately, I think my government has started doing something worse than that, and that is directly enabling a genocide, specifically the Gaza genocide. Now, when you're growing up as a child and you're in school, you're told to read books about things like the Holocaust. Like I had a middle school teacher who actually made us read 4 books on the Holocaust in a row, all in one term. And, that was hard to get through. And, they'd show us the documentaries, and you'd also saw things like Hotel Rwanda, and you'd be shown that this is the absolute worst of humanity. This is what we can do at our worst. But you're happy that, that's not the situation you're living in right now. Well, unfortunately, I don't feel like I could really say that anymore, because I feel that my government is enabling something just like that. Like, a way I've been trying to think about this is think of how school shootings have impacted America. And just to put a number on it, since 2000, about 328 people have died in school shootings, which obviously is way too much, and that's had a big impact on our culture. It's had an impact on how parents feel when they send their children to school. It has had an impact on how children feel when they're going to school. It's had an impact on how children feel about their peers. And it's had long-term psychological impacts on the people involved. If you're in something like that, then you'll probably be in therapy for years afterwards. It will probably affect your future relationships. It will probably affect your ability to hold down a job. Because when you go through something especially traumatic, that's the kind of thing that can happen. I mean, there's people who go through a car accident and end up having those types of problems. So just imagine what's going on in Gaza, a place where 14,000 children have died and around 40,000 people, and those are probably underestimates in less than 6 months. I mean, that is a scale of evil that is hard to comprehend, and the long-term effects of course, the people who die, that's a tragedy, but the people who survive, how will you be impacted by that, I don't think there's any amount of therapy that will let you get over that. If you're in Gaza right now, you pretty much guarantee know at least one person who has died, and a lot of people have had their whole families wiped out. And I don't mean that in the sense of just one household. I mean whole families. We're seeing whole family names just disappear from the books. That's the level of atrocity that we are seeing right now. But unfortunately, my government, the American government, has been enabling that. And specifically, the Biden-Harris administration, a Democratic administration, has been enabling that. And unfortunately, Suzanne Bonamici has been participating in the enablement of the Biden-Harris administration's enablement of the Israeli government's genocide in Gaza. And I really don't think there's much excuse here. A couple years ago, there were these parents who bought their kid a gun when they knew the kid had mental issues, and they knew the kid had school shooting ideation, and the kid did a school shooting, and everyone was rightfully angry. There was deep moral outrage at those parents, and the parents rightfully ended up going to jail. But what is the government doing right now? I mean, when you think about it, let's just say if I sold a kid a gun and I knew that kid was going to commit a school shooting, I would be a very terrible person. But at the end of the day, that would be a relatively small atrocity. I mean, probably talking on average, I don't know, 4 or 5 people dying. That's pretty bad, and that would rightfully make me a monster. But what is our government doing right now? Basically, it's doing that, but on an industrial scale. Literally magnitudes over that level of evil. I mean, it's hard to think about, and I don't think Suzanne Bonamici or the Democratic Party really have any excuse here, because it was obvious what was going on from early on. Even at the beginning, before any of the real bombs started getting dropped, Benjamin Netanyahu was saying, you must remember what Amalek has done to you. And if you read your Bible, Christians, Jews out there, you know that basically God ordered all of Amalek to be killed, for women, children, everyone, and they left one alive, and that ended up causing the biblical Israelis problems. So when you're making that reference, especially to a population that's being held in a prison camp, you know what you're doing. Benjamin Netanyahu absolutely knew what he was doing when he made that reference. But he wasn't the only one, because you have Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said, we're imposing a complete siege on Gaza. There will be no electricity, no food, no water, no fuel. Everything will be closed. Now, when you're talking about a full siege like that, you're not just saying we're going to make sure Hamas doesn't get no food and no water. You're talking about the entire population. That's women, children, elderly, everyone. And when you think about it, that kind of warfare will affect the most vulnerable the most, because if you're a guy in your late teens, your 20s, you could probably survive taking, a week off of food, a day or day and a half off of water. I mean, it won't be pleasant, but you'll probably be all right. But the type of people that will hurt the most are developing children, women, pregnant women especially, and the elderly. So this type of warfare most impacts the most vulnerable populations. But he's not the only one who talked. There was another Israeli President, Herzog, who said it's an entire nation out there that is responsible. It is not true, this rhetoric about civilians not being aware, not involved. It's absolutely not true. They could have risen up. They could have fought that evil regime which took over Gaza. Now, here's the thing. That is literally Osama bin Laden logic. Like, you can read Osama bin Laden's letter, and what does he talk about? Well, there are no innocent civilians in America. And why weren't there any innocent civilians in America? Well, because, America is a democracy, so American citizens are responsible for the government they elect. So if their government is doing evil things like atrocities overseas, then, well, that's the responsibility of American citizens. So it follows that it is right to kill American citizens. That was the Osama bin Laden logic. And we have Israeli government officials laying out the exact same type of logic, and we're indeed seeing actions that correspond with that. The 40,000 dead people and 14,000 dead children, which again is probably an underestimate. And keep in mind that the Democratic Party is the one overseeing all this, and you're kind of taught that, the Democratic Party, that's the party of bleeding hearts. That's the party of these idealists, those tree huggers, the people who, professors, they don't understand how things work. They're just naive, but they're so kind and they want to do the right thing. They're the nice party, whereas the Republican Party is the mean and evil party. Well, there's nothing about this that's nice. It's a genocide. There's nothing about that that's remotely nice, so I think we need to rethink this perception of the Democratic Party. And specifically, Suzanne Bonamici has been enabling this. And let me check to make sure I've got my numbers right here exactly. All right, 173 Democrats in the House of Representatives voted to send $26 billion in military aid to Israel on April 20th. And keep in mind, at this point, we're talking about 4 months in, so there was no excuse at this point. You couldn't have said that, I thought it was just heated rhetoric. I didn't think anything was going to happen. At this point, everyone knew. suffers no excuse, but Suzanne Bonamici still voted to send $26 billion worth of weapons to a country committing a genocide. And I think that is unacceptable. And it's as morally depraved as it gets, but it gets worse. It's not like the Democratic Party is ashamed of this. If we read their new platform that came out of a convention, we see that the platform brags about sending weapons to Israel, it brags about running cover for Israel and the UN, and it repeats a bunch of Israeli propaganda points about how everything that's going on there is just self-defense. The 14,000 dead children, well, it's just self-defense. And that's the kind of narrative cover that the Democratic Party has been running for the state of Israel. We've even seen the American government under the Biden-Harris administration, which Suzanne Bonamici has been supporting, doing things like run cover for Israel and the UN, tried to defend Israel from the justified ICC and ICJ charges, because apparently that's just what our empire wants to do. And I want to live in a nation. I don't want to live in an empire. So, if Suzanne Bonamici refuses to confront the Biden-Harris administration and the Democratic Party establishment, then she needs to be replaced, and I'm running for that seat. Thank you.